السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته يا Imad.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
And a big assalamu alaikum to all of our audience as well.
وعليكم
And
السلام on
the
behalf of
people
them.
that come. Yeah, okay, thank you. And hopefully they can put their wa alaikum salams in the comments as well, inshallah, as they come in. Anyway, how are you?
Coronavirus, unfortunately. I've still got some symptoms left.
So, mashallah, how's your recovery going?
Alhamdulillah. To be fair, I haven't experienced what it feels like to be ill in a long time. So it's just a reminder for myself of how it feels to be like really ill. Now, I mean, cough is starting to go, but I had like a persistent cough over the last few days. And now it's just kind of can't taste anything. It's a weird thing, taste, man. When you can't taste physically, it's like, what is food?
Yeah.
You know, the concept of food just goes out the window because everything's the same, and that's the reality of food. It's your taste buds that deceive you, and they're the interpreters. And if you don't have them, then all food is the same. It's like what
Yeah, but
mush.
I think biologically the way we've kind of some of our biology works against us knowing that because based on evolution, obviously, we've been taught to kind of when we feel something sweet. So sugar as a whole, once you start eating it, it makes you want to eat more because you know that
Mm.
you're only going to have a bit of it, so like make sure you have it. And even I've noticed this is a bit of a deeper point. When some people eat, I noticed they go into a certain zone of eating. And I've been thinking of making like a mindful eating kind of course for a while as well. But I think this zone of eating, that people are become unconscious of the food rather than becoming conscious and aware of what they're eating. They kind of go into this zone where they're just putting things in the mouth, and I would argue actually not tasting the food at all. And I would say this is the default. And like you're saying, because you're saying we use the taste buds, but I think biologically, some of our evolution has made us like want things which are actually not good for us, especially based on the climate. Like we don't have to. If we see something, look who's here, man.
Oh, who's this?
You know this guy.
Oh, Bilal Mustafa, mashallah. Sheikh Bilal Mustafa. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Sahil's
I'm not
here as
saying
well.
so. Oh, my friend,
Spider-Man here as well.
my friend, Spider Man.
Alhamdulillah. But it's good to see Bilal.
MashaAllah.
Bilal, Manana, Hazrat Bilal
Yeah.
Mustafa, mashallah. But then this idea of sugar, it actually works against us rather than for us. And I think that's an important thing. So when you lose taste, because I think one of the things, I think we actually overestimate how nice food tastes.
I know what you mean by the zone, as in you're just in a state of utter pleasure, which it doesn't really matter what gets you to that state. It's just it's like you have chemicals in the brain called dopamine, these neurotransmitters in your brain, and when you have loads of dopamine, serotonin as well to some effect, but it's like it gives you like it's a pleasure chemical. That's how they used to describe it. It's a lot more than that, the function of dopamine. It has a function in movement and stuff, and that's why when people have Parkinson's disease and they have like a tremor, it's a problem with their dopamine receptors. So obviously it has a greater function than just giving you pleasure. But I know what you mean. Like when you're in a state, it's just like you're in the zone, and you're just you're all like tense and happy, and it's what gets you to that. And I think that's what your spiritual. It's a spiritual thing in it. Your spiritual side. It's training yourself to achieve that like happiness and that pleasure in like with the dhikr of Allah and with like the halal pursuits. How's it
Spider-Man's put a comment,
spiritual?
Brother Sahid. MashaAllah, yeah, that's really true, man. I mean, from a spiritual
Um,
perspective, like also, I kind of think like the du'as that we meant to read help us get rid of some of that. Do you get what I mean? So saying
mm,
Bismillah like brings you back awareness. What Science said is the enjoyment of food is a way of saying thank you to Allah for the food that He's given you. The enjoyment. I would say that obviously after you eat the food, I don't think this comes to a broader concept, and this obviously it affects people who are trying to be more healthy,
Mm,
as in the psychology of food, a little bit. But here, I think there's an overemphasis on the food being enjoyable. I don't think it's worth that much for, like, how much can it be worth just for the moment that the just for that moment that the food's in your mouth, you have loads of enjoyment. Is that really like something to kind of? I think in the past, because food's been kind of more scarce and we've had to kind of chase after it, I
mm,
think sometimes we have like an over obsession over how important it is for food to kind of taste good and be good. But I would say that the way of saying thank you would be, regardless of whether you enjoy the food, is bringing that awareness to the actual
mm.
nutrition which it gives you, the energy which it gives
Yeah.
you. Um,
I think, to be honest, one of the purposes of food is to have that, you know, is to have that ladha, you know, ladis. Sorry, that's my little brother in the background there. I don't know if you can hear, but
yeah, I can hear.
he's being a menace.
Yeah, no worries.
Um, I was just saying, you know, food and drink. I think it was it about the milk like of the ladhatul lisharibin. You know, it's mentioned in the Quran, and you know,
But that's in
it's
Jannah, isn't it?
at so even no, it's talking about milk as well. I think I'm talking about the
Oh,
verse
is
in
it?
Surah An-Nahl. Allah Ta'ala alam. The verse just got out of my
Okay.
head, but I think it was actually talking about milk, if I'm not mistaken. You know, but you're right. I mean, about Jannah, it is Ladhatul Sharibin as well.
Oh, okay,
Allah
okay.
Ta'ala alam. But in
Mm.
terms of what's one of the purposes of food is kind of enjoyment.
Is it?
Yeah, I think one of the otherwise, why would you have good food, and why would it be something that's like, for example, this was a sad thing actually. Molna Asad, who is someone I work with, he is CEO of this charity called Community Outreach, and he, mashallah, he's a really good, a really amazing guy. Hold on one second. He's a really amazing guy, and he mentioned something that he does a lot of charity work. He's got a charity called Community Outreach, so he does loads of charity work in the UK, and he does charity work in places like Uganda. And a few weeks ago, he gave this talk at our university actually for Charity Week, which is like the I spoke to you about Charity Week a few weeks ago. It's like where once a year the universities raise money for Islamic relief. So he was talking about poverty in the UK and poverty abroad, and he was saying how when he went to Uganda, he wanted to really feed these kids meat, and
Mm.
it was just like it's a treat for them. You know, it was a treat for them to feed, and they were like the people who he went with, because obviously when you work with a charity, you work with people on the ground. They were like, "Oh, get them some. No, this is kind of the normal food they eat." But he said, "Nah, I want to give them meat." So he got them meat,
Mm.
and subhanallah, they only had a little portion, and they saved the rest. And he saw it, and it just broke his heart. And he also mentioned he gave like a little it was a bottle of like Coke or fizzy drink, and he really wanted to give these kids fizzy drink. And when they had the fizzy drink, he said that they've never ever seen fizzy drink. They didn't know how to open the bottles, so they literally, the team had to open the bottles and give it to them.
Mm.
So the point of that was, subhanallah, obviously, these people are really poor, and it was a treat for them though. And I think that's one of the
Mm.
purposes of, and by having the ladis food, it's an opportunity for shukr as well. So
Yeah,
you
but
can
then
say,
I think it brings so it
mm,
depends how we define food then. Because if we're going to take Quranic kind of guidance, I would say halal and tayyib would be quite important. Halal obviously being like um, halal, but tayyib as in being good as well, being wholesome.
yeah,
And like in that example, the fizzy drink, I would say the fizzy drink is just why would you want to bring such a terrible thing into somebody's life? Like, why would you not just keep them away from something like that and give them like bring them avocados or dates or
okay,
dalbina or
okay,
porridge?
Mr. Nutritionist. I think there's no harm in this. I mean, obviously, to every food group, if you have in excess, it's harmful. But we were, and it's in our tradition anyway. Everything in moderation. الاقتصاد في النفقة نصف المعيشة أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. That moderation in spending is, half of a good life. The Prophet ﷺ taught us to be like a middle nation, a nation of moderation, not
Yeah,
too in
okay.
excess, not
So
too
just
less.
from what I'm
So
saying,
I think
from my
different things
perspective,
is fine.
so here this person, I would say, from my opinion, it depends how deep you want to go. So if you took some kind of idea of what they're eating at the moment, what kind of food they get,
Yeah.
and try and up level it, so it tastes better and it's more nutrition. So if they like kind of, I don't know, like porridge, they probably love porridge with their desi
Mm.
milk, something like that. But
Okay,
anyway,
but
man,
the thing is, the point was no. The point was, I understand what you're saying. You should be looking out for them, be like a well wisher for them by giving an upscale version of what they eat, which is more tasty and more nutritious for them, which is fair enough. But I think the purpose there, and subhanallah, I just thought about this now. It's humanity at its best. I think he, in his heart of hearts, just wanted them to have some pleasure, from the
yeah,
food. And subhanallah, and I think he thought one of the purposes when I eat is, you eat for taste. We do eat for taste as well. Not everyone, but most people, most human beings do eat for
yeah,
taste. I'm not saying it's a really virtuous thing to eat for taste, but generally, in our life, Allah's given us this ability to eat for taste. And I think he just really wanted them to try that and wanted to give them a treat, giving them a treat kind of thing. And
yeah.
they did really enjoy it and were really grateful. But
Alhamdulillah.
what was amazing is, they had a bit of the meat and then they saved it for later because they didn't want to consume it like in one go.
Mm.
It's like that the experiment where you have a child and you give them 5 chocolates now or 5 little sweets now, or they can get 10 if they wait. And that's how you test children. And usually, the younger a child is, they'll just have it now, and as they develop reason,
Mm.
right,
But I
they'll
think there's
they'll wait
another
for it.
study. So there's another study like that. I think it's called the marshmallow experiment, and it was more precise at judging success. Obviously, success is a bit subjective, but what they tried to measure was the success which the kids had, and they kind of got to the extent that the children who could wait the next day to get 2 marshmallows instead of getting one right now, more than IQ tests, more than their SAT scores, it was a more kind of correlative prediction of their success long term. So I think being able to kind of preserve that's kind of delaying gratification. Is the whole concept of delaying gratification there,
Yeah,
and also kind of to some extent taqwa, and self-discipline, and that in itself is kind of a high um, decider. And obviously, I think what happens with food, like you're saying, is there are, like we mentioned at the beginning when we went into the brain a bit, there are other chemicals involved. Like it's not always a logical decision; it is more of an emotional decision. Like you mentioned with this case, it's more like all the emotion around the pleasure of food and things like this. So
mm.
obviously, uh, trying to be too objective maybe isn't that clever either.
I think with the whole thing, I just remembered another hadith. Subhanallah, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam just brought it to us. Said,
Subhanallah.
"الطاعم الشاكر كالصائم الصابر," أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. The person who eats, has ta'am of food. Because ta'am, what is ta'am of food? Ta'am is taste. Ta'am in the Arabic language is to have the ability to taste. So a person who eats and it's eating something with taste, that's what I got out from it anyway. Looking too deep into the linguistics, I know, but
Okay.
uh, ta'am
Time
is
was
for
shirky,
taste.
but I would say the point of the Prophet ﷺ was clearly much more on the shukr than
Yeah,
the taste. I don't know what it is.
obviously the point is, the hadith reads,
Yeah.
الطاعم الطاعم الشاكر كصائم الصابر, that the person who eats and is grateful, the grateful person who eats is the same as the person who's fast and they are patient. For who's fasting and they are patient, meaning that, if you do eat and you're grateful to Allah, it's the same as you not going without food and being and fasting for the sake of Allah. So it's
Yeah.
like I think what that hadith is trying to show as well. It's not a bad thing to indulge in luxury as so long as you re- are grateful to Allah for what you have.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important. Because even on this meat thing, yeah. And this is where it gets a bit strange. Some people are so into their meat, and I notice it with meat more than other things. They're so into their meat that if they don't get meat, they kind of dishonor the food. And this is the
I
hadith
know
of
what
the
you
Prophet
mean.
sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the sunnah is quite clear. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't love everything. Sometimes there'd be some items which he wouldn't like. And we know quite authentically that he would not criticize, but he would leave it, unless it was haram. So the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't criticize like other types of food, even if he liked meat or if he liked a certain type of food. Just
Are
like
you,
we as humans,
you're
some
talking about the
humans,
incident of the lizard? Was it the lizard? Or was it a
um,
barbecue lizard? Yeah.
yeah,
In
there's a
the
lizard,
household.
and yeah, I think there's a household hadith where the Prophet ﷺ
Yeah. No, the Prophet
sent.
ﷺ was in the house of Maymuna, and Ibn Abbas was there, Khalid bin Walid was there. And Khalid bin Walid was one of those, macho men who enjoyed their
Really,
protein,
yeah,
whatever source of protein you have, grilled kind of lizard, anything will go. And the grilled barbecue was placed in front of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Hadith in Sahih Muslim, as far as I'm aware. So it was placed in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't, eat it, go near it or eat it. And then they asked him, is it hard? Because they paid attention to what the Prophet ﷺ ate. So they were like, "Oh, are you not
mm,
eating it because it's haram?" And he's like, "No, it's just, it's not from the food of my people. It's kind of disgusting for him, kind of thing, to eat that kind of thing." But
yeah.
then
But I think
Khalid bin
more,
Walid
but
munched it. Khalid bin Walid,
yeah,
it's
but I
like
think
that.
more than that. Like,
He
so
put
what I
it in
see
and out,
nowadays
gone.
is sometimes that some people who eat meat, like especially with this meat thing. So
Mm.
if it's not meat and it's like a vegetable dish instead,
Mm.
I'm not sure whether you can think about what I'm talking about. You might have somebody in your mind. So if it's not like a certain quality, if it's like it's like it might happen in madrasas as well, when the food which has been cooked is of a low quality, then it's like, oh, this is not even food. Like this is animal food. This is like salads, like leaves, and that kind of disregard for food, kind of disrespect for the actual food
Yeah.
itself. Even though like it's food which can be eaten. Like here, obviously, we're talking about certain institutes and their cooking healthiness. The nutrition is definitely not there much,
Mm.
um, but but
I
despite
mean,
that, I think to look down on it.
yeah, I
This
know
is
what you
very
mean.
common. Like to look down, and this is like, how can you eat that? What kind of thing is that to eat? As if like they've got a moral high ground by eating meat. And very often I see it
Yeah.
with meat eaters. And I had a discussion with this with an Arab brother who's studying in university, and he then cited the Quran to say that how can you لا تحرموا ما أحل الله لك. I think where that comes in the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions meat there. And I thought that was kind of a far-fetched
Yeah.
context of that verse to say
That
that that
that's
kind
yeah
of
that
applies.
that's not to do with me. That's to do with the white Surah Tahrim is the first Surah Tahrim. It's to do with the drink and the incident later on in Medina with the wives of the Prophet. So this is a good example of people using the Quran, just the words of the Quran, in any context, which is so wrong.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's that thing. Oh yeah, I'm right in using the meaning of this. And one thing I was going to mention as well, you mentioned about meat being like a staple in our diets now. And if you don't have
Not a
meat in it,
staple. Um, like I think we're. It depends how you generalize people. You know,
if we don't go with a meat, we don't go a day without eating meat. But to be honest with you, even like
who's we? Who's our? You putting every? Are you
we,
putting?
as in, it's not that we as in humanity, man, we're all bad. We're all bad in terms of
But I think
humanity.
this. Come on, man. There's a lot of vegetarians, vegans.
Yeah, okay.
People are
I'll
doing
tell
it.
you.
People are having more and more awareness.
Okay, my friend Hamza, his mom, mashallah, she's a vegetarian. And she always, mashallah, cooks, and Hamza always brings food over for the past like 4 or 5 years since I've known him. And wallahi, Auntie, may Allah give her a long life.
I mean,
Some of the food, without meat is so good. I'm not gonna lie. And then you think,
but what? Why is that a surprise? Like,
it's like because you feel an incompleteness because we live in a society. It's not
I
just
don't think
kind
so.
of
What society, man? It depends where you. If you eat meat every day, you feel like that. If you
yeah.
don't, if meat's like not really that important, and you can get most of your protein from eggs or plenty of other sources of protein. Like I think this is a misconception as well from a medical standpoint. Like you can get all the protein that you need without meat.
That's
Um,
contested. I don't think you can, to be honest with
okay,
you.
it's
I
contested a
think
little bit. I think the reason it's contested so much and people get very passionate about the other view Medically, it will be proven that you can get whatever you need from that. But the reason people want to contest it is because they want to keep meat in the diet and to give themselves the excuse of having meat.
Another thing as
I
well, when it comes to qurbani as well, a
mm,
vegetarian. Okay, in Islam, you're allowed to be vegetarian. Yeah, we agree with that. It's your personal preference, as in food is from the items of personal preference. Like we learned from the hadith a few minutes ago of Khalid bin Walid, where he ate something that the Prophet ﷺ didn't like. So it's
mm,
food in the category of food. When it comes to fibab ta'am, it's of personal preference. We agree that we're allowed to be vegetarian. And some people, cite that some ashab of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam were vegetarian.
mm,
And some of the companions didn't eat certain food as well because of previous factors in their religion. For example, Abdullah bin
mm.
Salam never really used to eat. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, man.
Yeah, okay. You just screamed, just went blank for a second. And
Oh,
then,
okay.
and it's not an eating out of, the Sharia said no. It's eating, out of your personal preference. But then comes another kind of question nowadays. So if you an Eid al-Adha, Qurbani at the Duha is a
Mm,
wajib upon everyone who can afford to do it. The Qurbani.
mm.
Can you pay money in lieu of giving a
Okay, man,
Duha?
that's too deep, man. That's too deep.
Exactly. No,
But
but that's
that's
where
going to go
the
into a fiqh
thamara
point.
of yeah, I know, but that's where the fruit of this argument of vegetarianism in Islam. This is where it comes to play. So when
Mm,
people sacrifice their sacrificial animal on Eid,
mm.
right? If you're a vegetarian, can you give money instead? This argument, and the majority opinion is no. It's duha is commanded by Allah Subhanahu wa
Mm.
Taala.
Yeah,
فَصَلِّ
but again,
لِرَبِّكَ
but this is
وَانْحَرْ.
very different. Like to have that once a year is not disputed. I mean, I wouldn't even think about that. Like once a year is perfectly fine, or 10 times a year is perfectly fine. When you go to 700 times a year, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So like that's a redundant argument completely because have it
Mm.
50 times a year.
Did you eat meat today?
Yeah, today I did.
I didn't. So I'm a
Okay. Yeah.
vegetarian today,
Okay,
alhamdulillah.
that's good. But the point is that should we have this high status for meat? And that's why I think it doesn't deserve. And I think people give it an unnecessary. And even from a nutritional standpoint, like you can get the protein and all the stuff which you get from meat. Maybe you're saying a little bit. Maybe you should have some kind of meat 2 or 3 times a week. Okay, maybe still. But the
Meat is
problem
from
is,
the tayyibat. Do you agree with
mm,
that? Meat is from Allah says in the Quran, "O you who believe, kulu min at-tayyibati." Eat from that which is good, the good things, the good stuff.
yeah,
So is meat included in the tayyibat?
meat's in the tayyibat
So if meat's in the tayyibat, why wouldn't you? Why should we
because
kind of
okay.
look at
So
it?
the
Is
problem
it a
I'm coming to,
derogatory thing, or is it
no, no,
the
no, no. It's not.
overconsumption of meat?
Meat's fine. Meat's fine. Okay, so the issue comes up when you have these meat eating people
Mm. Meat
who
eaters.
have this kind of, which is nothing. I had meat today. Yeah, I'm not like I don't have a problem with people that eat meat. The issue happens when the people. So imagine I ate meat today, and somebody else came to that same dish and took the rice. So it was a meat.
Mm,
It was a meat in rice. Yeah. So imagine
mm,
I just had the rice, or somebody else just had the rice, and they're
mm.
like, "Oh, why are you not eating meat? There's something wrong with you. Why do you not meet?" I find that a lot, that perception, and that comes from this high kind of status which is given to me, and this high status is not deserved. So it has a right as a tayyib food, just like bread and pasta and potatoes and avocados and blueberries and turmeric and all of these beautiful things which Allah has created. But to give it a higher status, I don't get that. I don't get the highest. It's like, oh, meat on a daily basis is good, or meat regularly is good. And Sheikh Hamza Yusuf describes the Prophet ﷺ as semi-vegetarian.
No, that's-
And if you look at Sirah, the Prophet ﷺ himself, that's quite accurate, personally. Like you don't find meat regularly in his life. And
But
if you look at
is
some of
that
the
an issue of
riwayat,
is that an issue of availability though? The availability of meat.
okay, but again, we're thinking about like this pedestal which meat is given, rather than,
Okay,
I agree it's tayyibat, but
yeah.
where does this pedestal come from? How can you
There
then
are.
say that meat shouldn't be? So if
I don't
somebody's
think meat.
vegetarian,
Mm.
somehow like they're out, and even bringing that qurbani argument up, as if like a vegetarian can't do qurbani without eating meat. Like you don't have to eat meat to do Qurbani,
I
especially
think that's the
nowadays.
whole. Okay, it's going back to the ontology of Qurbani. What is Qurbani? Qurbani is to have an animal, to bring the animal up, and to choose the best animal and then actually slaughter it. Obviously, in this country, we can't really do that, so we have to kind of do Qurbani metaphorically in that sense, where any animal is just kind of slaughtered that fulfills the criteria. In terms of food in general, I think I don't know how we got really so deep into this topic, but it's because I couldn't taste, and it brought me to the reality of this tasting thing. I think throughout the time, and it's the problem that we have in the 21st century. It's not a problem, but it's a ni'mah in disguise. I think if you can do shukr of it, it's the globalization of the world's palate, in the sense that we have access to any type of food we want today, right? However, in history, only the elite, only people royalty would eat meat on a daily basis, and when you would invite people, you would invite them with meat. The Prophet ﷺ did like certain part of meat. The is it the shoulder bone?
Shoulder.
Allah, Allah Ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ did enjoy that. There was an element of enjoyment of food of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He did like dubba. If you look at the shama'il of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he did like to eat pumpkins. Again, there's another thing. People see in the shama'il, oh, the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam likes to eat pumpkins, and now everyone, I'm eating pumpkins for.
Okay,
Oh
but
yeah,
obviously
yeah.
look here. Okay, I want to come back to Maqasid. I just want to go through some of the comments here. Just give a bit of a shout out to some of Bilal Mustafa was still hanging around for a while, mashallah. He actually stayed. Sister Goldstein is saying Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, alaikum
Uh,
salam.
Sahil's agreeing and just saying that it's important to say Alhamdulillah and stuff. Sahil saying there's an extent it stops once you've swallowed, which we'll come to that in a minute. Be happy with what you have. Sister Fawzia is saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sahil's agreeing with you, and presumably he said that to disagree with me more than actually agreeing with you.
No, Sahil's my man, because me and Sahil made up that time when I dissed him. So me and
Oh,
Sahil
mashallah.
are boys now.
Bilal Mustafa is saying it's all about being organic and limiting meat, and this is where I'm going to come in. That's a nice point. Thank you, Bilal and Maulana Hazrat Bilal. The point with this is how much is it even possible to procure halal organic meat in the UK? I've been trying in my ends, and it's impossible.
But
We'll come to the,
I thought in Chelmsford, isn't it the case that your dad actually does the
yeah, but it's not
slaughter of the
organic.
chickens?
It's not organic.
What is organic then?
We don't buy. I don't know. Like free range organic. So the chickens we get are caged and probably been injected. I'm not sure about exactly, but organic means it's kind of it's fed organically. It's allowed to roam around. It's got a healthy kind of lifestyle, something like that. And obviously, I personally, some people have asked me as well. People who are health conscious and are aware of dangers. Can I say dangers? Dangers of meat which is not organic. And that's a separate health discussion. But that's why Bilal Mustafa just spoke about. In order to go organic, you're going to have to limit your meat because of your budget and because of it's basically impossible to find it. So I decided to throw some eggs at us. I
think another thing as well, the shari is the hakim. What's the juristic principle that we have to the nearest effect that the lawmaker has infinite wisdom. And this is really, really deep when it comes to the issue of keeping things permissible and things which are impermissible, right? We can have a shot at trying to find out why things are impermissible, right? And this is a deep thing when it comes to Islamic jurisprudence and, working out things which are permitted and things which are not permitted. But, we can have a shot at finding our illah, but to find out hikmah, that's something which is reserved for the lawmaker. We won't really know what the wisdom. We can take out wisdoms, but unless there is some sort of, there's a whole methodology for finding
but
out
here, look,
and reasoning why things are haram and halal.
But here, look. If you're looking at sunnah, yeah, we have to go overarching a little bit because this is specific. I don't think the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, essentially, I don't think Islam really cares that much whether you do or don't eat meat.
Yeah, of course.
But I do think Islam cares a lot about whether you look after your body.
And Islam cares about moderation. Islam cares about moderation, and when you have resources, how you use them.
Are you saying no? how is eating meat good resourcefulness?
I didn't say it was. You're
Oh, okay.
using me as a as like I'm not an advocate for meat. I just said
Oh,
meat is
okay.
a luxurious item. I didn't say meat you have to eat every single day. I'm not like a meat crew, team
Okay.
meat.
Okay.
Well, I don't think meat should be demonized. I don't think meat should be seen as derogatory, and I think it's un-Islamic to say meat is haram or meat is should be it's not haram, but it's there's karaha in it. To see that karaha in it, I think it's un-Islamic to see,
Mm.
oh, it's disliked or why, that kind of thing. Because
Yeah, but
this,
obviously, okay. If you're looking at karaha, this is where Qurbani argument would make sense. Yeah, Qurbani argument makes sense here. But I don't think the Qurbani to take it beyond. And again, the point, which was, it wasn't actually more of a. It was more of a like people who eat meat kind of claiming a moral high ground over people who don't. And I think that's kind of a bit of a finer
I'm
line.
more,
Whether
I don't know. I think it's your opposite. I think no one said, oh, yeah, you eat meat and that's a good kind of thing. I think now,
I find that a
today,
lot personally from my experience. I find that a lot.
because maybe because I hang around a lot of hipsters and that kind of,
But no,
that
no.
kind
But
of
even some of
crew.
the stuff you said, even some of the stuff you
So
said today,
vegetarianism, it's
no,
fine.
but even some of the stuff you said today, like it kind of seemed to be giving me a bit of a higher status. We've got some comments coming in. So Bilal Mustafa is saying, he's just talking about the point that some Muslims do have farms and they organically get chickens. The price rockets and they sell out very quickly. They're very very high in demand. Um, and Bilal's brought up another point, which is Islam cares about the treatment of the animal. Hence, it. I think tayyibat. He's talking about tayyibat there.
Mm.
So the importance of tayyibat. I think what Bilal is saying here is halal and tayyib. Halal means you've slaughtered it with the name of Allah. Tayyibat also, not only does it mean the nutrition of the food, but also it means how you treat the animal before, which is kind of, I think,
Mm.
probably linking into his point about being organic and free range,
A
that
point
kind of
on that
thing.
comment of Bilal as well. Why the cost skyrockets and the prices and stuff. I think as well, it's very difficult to be a Muslim farm owner. And I think what my Ustad Mullah Ilyas mentioned, I was in his house like last year. He mentioned this guy who in around the areas of Bolton, he has a farm. And Mullah Ilyas's mum passed away, by the way, Allahu yarhamuha, a few
No.
days ago. It wasn't COVID, it was lymphoma. Really amazing man, and his mom equally, inshallah. May Allah grant her Jannatul Firdaus. He
I mean,
mentioned there was this another Maulana who has like a farm, and he had loads of problems with like I think it was hares or like this. It wasn't a fox. It was this other sort of animal. I forgot what the animal was. I forgot exactly what the animal was, but he had a lot of problems with these, and it's really expensive to kind of keep them out. And they used to kind of go and eat
but
his
can't you get
chickens, and
insurance?
I don't know, but it's difficult if you don't have like resources and a huge kind of infrastructure to be like on a small scale and do that. I think that's why I think
Mm.
if people got together and they thought, because it's possible if like 10 or 20 households got together and they said we're always going to buy meat from this particular guy, nowhere else, right? Then he would have he'll think, okay, I will kind of raise these chickens up and do them organically slaughter them, these animals, and they'll be proper halal and tayyiban, and then these people will always buy from me, so I'll have like a continuous kind of continuous demand, and
You're
for that
trying to
reason I'll have that. Yeah, by the way, sponsor me. Yeah, I'll get a farm in the future, inshallah.
inshallah. Okay, man. Anyway,
Imad's
man.
meats. Imad's
Uh,
meats. You heard
okay,
it
man.
first here. You
No,
first heard it here.
please. I'm sure there's
Sponsored
other
by
things.
Sahil. Oh boy.
Mashallah. Um, uh, Bilal Mustafa is talking about Sheikh Ilyas Tam. Mashallah. But okay, so I just want to just mention that Maqasid point, because I think the thing is we can go deep into what food wants us, what we should eat, whether we should sacrifice a big animal, whether we can do money instead of an animal. We can go into the thick of it. But I think overall, when it comes to food, like it comes to with your 25 press ups, mashallah, whenever it comes to this, I think the awareness of health, and this is where we started,
Yeah.
which is actually about when we eat food, can we bring that awareness to the food? And I think the problem I had And this whole conversation has been because of this issue, which I've kind of seen from my own perspective, which is people when they have a food which isn't the food which they think is the ultimate food. So it might be the other way around. It might be the vegetarian thinking that the meat's bad, or it might be the meat person thinking that the vegetarian person's a bit of a rabbit or whatever. But whichever way it goes, I think just being able to bring that appreciation, that regardless of whatever I have, and not being so bothered about the taste. And if you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. I'm not forcing avocados down you, even though a lot of my clients I do. But I think if you don't want it, you don't have to have it. But to be grateful is very important, and to actually um, appreciate whatever food there is actually something which is very often forgotten, I think. And
Okay,
sometimes we can be quite quick to criticize food which we don't like.
so the resolutions that we have so far, let's see if we agree on them. To be vegetarian in Islam is fine. To be a meat eater in Islam is fine. There is no preference given one over the other.
Okay.
Meat eating shouldn't be demonized. However, it should be in moderation. Meat is a luxury item. Um, Again, I think just looking after your body in general and eating all foods that are available to you in moderation is it's the way forward, and that's how it should be, and that's one of the purposes of Sharia. One of the purposes of food is ladha, is taste. We get this from the Shamail as well. The Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, why would he like certain food then?
That's ada though, isn't it? That's not. I don't think that makes up the
No,
core of
but
Sharia.
it's
That's
not
too much.
Sharia. I'm not saying
That's too much of a
Shara'an.
far.
I'm not saying in terms of a Sharia, like juristically, it's a purpose of the food. I'm talking in general. Taste is one of the purposes of food. Like the reason why people eat food,
Okay,
it's because of taste.
but I think taste comes. Okay, so this is a good question. So, do we eat to live, or do we live to eat? Yeah. Now
Yeah.
this is
Okay.
now.
In the hierarchy
So,
of purposes, maybe not. It's lower down in the hierarchy.
oh, okay, that's fine then.
Yeah.
Much lower
Yeah.
down
I'm
then.
not saying number one, number one. Oh, taste. That's it. Because obviously, good
But I think,
things that taste good
but I
are
think,
bad for
yeah,
you.
yeah. Okay, it's good to taste food, but I think again, coming back to those, the way the brain works sometimes,
Yeah.
we can actually trick ourselves into obsessing over the food, the way the food tastes, even though it's not actually that important. Well, it is a bit important. It's a little bit important. One of the maqasid, but I don't think is. I think the problem which I see is some people obsess over that, and that can
Mm.
ruin your health. If you can't be logical, and it takes away some of that subjectivity and makes it quite objective. Is this food good for you? Is this what you should be eating right now? And actually logically thinking about it. Once you logically think about it, it might be that you have to eat something which tastes not as nice as the thing you're eating. And then that's where some of we get override. Our logic is overrided sometimes here at this point by that desire for food again. Sometimes the shahwa.
Interestingly, I remembered Skinner we spoke about earlier in a different, I think his linguistic theory or his learning theory, but there's a positive negative reinforcement thing where I can't remember which it was in psychiatry. I learned it when I was in first year. So you can condition an animal to, for example, there's this experiment. I forgot who the scientist was, but you have like a dog, and whenever you press the bell, like the food would come and basically the dog would eat, and this would happen every time the dog was given food, to such an extent that the dog actually is, I think it's called operant conditioning if I'm not mistaken, and people can google that and check it out in extensively. But every single time the bell was pressed, the dog would kind of expect the food, to such an extent that they stopped giving the food and they pressed the bell and the dog would start salivating. So there was kind of a reinforcement there, and they through that they're trying to show that you can build strong neural pathways and connections with two like really unlinked things. So it's a similar thing with kind of with the sugar and experiment on mice as well, where you can whenever it goes to one direction, you can train a mouse to eat a particular food, and you can give them rewards and things to go in one direction rather than the other direction, and they start liking to do that and preferring to do that. So you can condition preference as well, and I think that's the concept of acquired taste. There's this thing where sushi and some things that it's an acquired taste, and there's a concept, you can learn to like something later on, and I think
Yeah, and
that's an
I
interesting
think one of the
concept to me.
problems in this country as well, you have the easy foods and the cheap foods tend to be the unhealthiest. So parents can very often, parents that don't have like free time to look after their kids, they're gonna go and get things which make the kids happy and quiet. And that taste very often is then acquired. So 5 years later, when you realize the kid's getting a bit fat or whatever, or needs to eat different food, or needs to actually have some energy, and you try and change that, then it can be very difficult. So I think neurologically that will I think neurologically that would kind of make us that we kind of we're wired to go that way, and the food companies use that to their advantage. So when you go into a supermarket, the sugar-laden objects, which look full of sugar, will be at the eye height of children, so they can use their pester power to get those things. And when they eat them, because they're full of sugar, they want to eat more afterwards. So the food industry overall, including the cattle and the poultry industry, the meat industry, so this is where it comes together, like because the food industry wants you to eat more.
Yeah.
So that's where we have that kind of, it's a bit of a conspiracy, which I think is what I'm meant to talk about. But I think this conspiracy is one which I believe in actually. It's not really a conspiracy, but the food market will give you food to make you eat more food because they want you to buy more and more of their product.
I'm just looking for a note I wrote once. There were some stats I read in a paper actually. You know that there are 2 billion Muslims worldwide, and okay, it wasn't this one.
Okay.
Okay.
Bilal Mustafa
Oh
is
yeah,
asking
here
about
it is. The
HMC.
halal food market. The halal food market is valued at $600 billion US, and that's by a study by on Omar and Jaffa to 2011. So they kind of valued the halal food market worldwide at
Yeah.
600 billion US, and the Muslim
Yeah, man.
consumers account for 15 billion of the world's population. 70% of Muslims follow a halal diet. These are all taken from studies, and non-Muslims also prefer halal products as well. This is found in research because
Mm.
halal products are considered cleaner, healthier, and tastier, and that's a study by Bergen et al. In 2007. There's some
But I
facts
think
there regarding.
recently there's been a lot of stigma against halal by the media and the press. I'm not sure whether you saw it was on the front pages of some of the newspapers where halal meat was stigmatized, and a lot of the far right kind of campaigners have been actively campaigning. And I think since then, I've personally, obviously, I've got a lot of friends who have takeaways, so sometimes I go and chill there, and I'll answer the phone.
Oh,
So they're like, "Is it
You don't eat. You just chill there. Yeah?
just to meet them
You
in
don't
it?
kind
I'm
of.
an imam.
Oh yeah, but you say you don't eat. No, the food. Oh no. It's
Not usually. If I went to a takeaway, I wouldn't
too
eat. I just
unhealthy for me.
not
I
unhealthy.
get
Just
you.
you have to wait for them to cook it. If it was fast food, maybe like if they gave me something straight away, but I'm gonna talk to them
Okay.
for 5 minutes, not for. If I say start cooking, then I'm stuck there, innit? So so I don't let
Okay.
them cook. I just meet them anyway. So then whilst I'm there, that guy goes busy, and I answer the phone. When I answer the phone, so this is Chelmsford, Colchester. You say or you say hello, obviously, and the name of the restaurant, which I can't name for legal reasons. And then you say, and then sometimes they ask, is it halal? And the one I was in, I didn't think it was halal, so I said no. And she said, "Oh, okay, brilliant. Thank God, everyone on our phone is halal, and I really don't want this halal meat. So it's ruining our country." And oh, okay, and I took an order and put it through. So, from my experience of about 10, 15 people, and if a lot of people in my area, people tend to avoid halal because they have like this stigma against it sometimes. But Bilal Mustafa is asking about HMC, and again, that's part of that industry. HMC in itself is a business which can run to authorize halal food. And again, how much of that food is actually tayyib is a separate question. Although we've not got too much time to go into.
People, I think what with the HMC thing, and this is obviously my friends who I speak to about HMC a lot, will know this, where HMC and halal are not synonymous. Halal doesn't mean HMC and vice versa. I think, and the second question is, to what level of inquiry does a Muslim need to uh,
Mm,
do? What level of inquiry does a Muslim need to do to ascertain if food is halal or haram? Right,
mm,
and it's and it comes down to testimony, it comes down to trust, it comes down to who gives you the food. Interestingly, the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha reports, أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, but he said, the wording just escaped my head.
Relax, man.
Yeah, you told me this last time and it came straight flooding back.
Well, I told you to relax.
Yeah, you told me last time. The hadith. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she said to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that someone gave us food, la nadri, adhukira smullahi alayhi am la, that we didn't know if Allah's name was read upon it or no. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, kuluhu, eat it because the name of Allah is in every Muslim's heart.
Okay, man. I wasn't expecting you to bring up that hadith. That's going to open up a whole kind of. We've got 2 minutes left.
That will open up a whole kind of worm.
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes left, Imad. Let's go through a couple of the messages. So Sahil saying avocados are lovely with lime and lemon.
First bit of the hadith. Inna qawman ya'tuna bilahmin la nadri adhukira smullahi alayhi.
Sahil saying that avocados taste best. Do you like avocados, Imad?
I don't mind them.
Okay, with lemon and lime, according to Sahil, and pasta.
Yeah.
And Bilal Mustafa just made a point. Mufti Inayatullah rahimahullah said, ask the person serving the food if it's halal, that's enough. According to Bilal Mustafa, Mufti Hazrat Maulana Bilal Mustafa, that's enough for him. And I think personally, like, how much beyond that can you actually go? It is always going to be subjective. So, like Imad said, HMC is not halal. Halal is not necessarily HMC. That you do have to do, vice versa in that.
What's interesting is one of my there's this go-to place that I have in Brighton, and there's one branch in Brighton and in London as well. It's this kind of sushi Japanese place called Kokoro. I'll take you when you come, inshallah, next time. So on there, they're not on the door. They're certified halal by a letter of the imam. There's the imam's letter. This imam wrote a letter and he says, this food in this establishment falls into the category of food that's halal by Allah, as mentioned in the laws of the Quran in Surah Maida. And he gave his own kind of sign, and I thought that was a really good thing, because on his authority, and that's what it is. That's what halal comes down to. It's someone's authority and someone's testimony, that I bear testimony that the food in this establishment is halal. So it's a written testimony.
Alhamdulillah. Anyway, man, we're coming to the end of our thing. Sahil saying that he said that some other people think that halal meat is magic. It makes people like Islam. So if people eat halal meat, they might become Muslims, apparently, according to Sahil. So he's probably going to have a campaign and fundraise for getting halal meat to everyone. But Jazakallah khair, everyone. We're at the end of our time. And Alhamdulillah, we went quite deep on a couple of things. I think mainly we discussed the status of meat in Islam. We also discussed the importance of gratitude with food. So regardless of how much you don't like the taste or how much you don't like the status of the food that you have in front of you, it's still food, and it's still important to be grateful for that food. And Imad, Jazakallah, please finish off. Inshallah, you've got like
this hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, the hadith I mentioned, عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها. This is hadith from Aisha. أن قوما قالوا للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إن قوما يأتون باللحم لا ندري أذكر اسم الله عليه أم لا فقال سموا عليه أنتم وكلوه.
Okay, but this hadith is going to confuse everyone. Why do you keep saying it's going to confuse everyone, man?
I'm just saying, no, I'm talking about level of inquiry and level of trust. If a Muslim gives you food, for example, this has happened on many occasions as well. With like, we have a neighbor, and she's not really practicing. And I remember once, because we always give her food, and she thought once she'd give us back food. This is when she first kind of moved in, and she's Turkish, and obviously we assume she's Muslim. And so she gave us food, and there was just some doubt right at the beginning. She gave chicken, I remember, And then my mum actually went and asked her, oh, just as a normal thing, because first I thought it'd be really rude, but my mum was kind of, on good terms with her. She said, oh, can we just ask where you got the chicken from? And she goes, I'm not sure. Sometimes I get it from Aldi, sometimes I get it from Asda. So this was defo, kind of haram, like, it wasn't
Yeah, but
halal, it
you'd be
wasn't
surprised how
zabiha.
common that is in Muslims. Like a lot of Muslims don't have that awareness that food can actually be. Like one person I was with, and this is
Mm,
like a hardcore Muslim who prays quite a lot,
yeah.
and he was like, we went to a place, and he's like, of course it's halal. It's not pork. So all chicken for him was halal.
Oh,
So
okay,
the
okay.
understanding, obviously, if we studied Islam for like 20 years, you pick that up after a while. But not everyone has that understanding. It's a very common misconception.
Okay,
Even
I
in
can't.
Pakistan, I've seen this.
Yeah, I can't believe we went 50 minutes and I haven't brought this up. Okay, we have to carry on for another 5 minutes.
No, no, quick,
Okay,
man, quick. We'll
all right.
finish in
Basically,
one minute.
when I went to America last year, so I might have mentioned this in the podcast before. I went on an internship, but when I was in the second year in the summer of when I was studying medicine, the second year. So I went for approximately 3 months. I went to Chicago, I went to New York, and when I first, this was a major thing. When I came to America, I landed, and loads of I stayed with really amazing people who are my friends till this day. Some of them probably going to watch this podcast, right? So yeah, man akala dhabihatana. So these brothers, I remember when I first landed, and we went and we had this discussion about halal and dhabiha, and I was thinking, what halal and dhabiha are the same thing. Halal is what's permissible, and dhabiha means what is slaughtered. So, and then I
How
found
is
out
that
there's
the
this
same thing?
huge. Exactly. But there's this huge thing in the States, and to some extent, I knew it was present in England, but I thought it was a minority, and it was a minority where the halal animal is halal because of the ayah of the Quran, وَطَعَامُهُمْ حِلٌّ لَكُمْ, right? So halal is halal for you. So chicken, halal. McDonald's, halal. Everything halal by definition. If the animal is halal, then it's halal. And because America is a quote unquote Christian country, and I thought it was just confined to a few people, but it's a widespread thing. And there's this whole huge debate going on with Ahlul Ilm. It's actually an opinion. And to be honest, it did broaden my horizons where, I was kind of really in this narrow view. And the funny thing is, our like house group that we made, based on the first discussion is Man akala dhabihatana. Because that's a hadith, and I said the hadith in the beginning. His brothers are Arabic as well. So there's a hadith where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man akala dhabihatana, whoever eats our meat, was man salla salatana, man istaqbala qiblatana, وصلى صلاتنا وأكل ذبيحتنا فذلك المسلم فهو في ذمة الله وذمة الرسول." Right? Whoever eats our meat, whoever prays towards our qibla, whoever prays our salah. So when I went to America, it was like a normal kind of thing, and then I found out there is the kind of opinion from Shafi'i school of fiqh, and from Shafi in the as well. I discussed this to quite a deep level.
So Sister
And
Goldson is saying that it's confusing people's minds what is halal, what is actually halal for people, and also she's saying halal. So does halal mean the way that you cut it, or is it more broad term than that?
so that's it. In America, they were saying that dhabiha is a distinct. They made a dichotomy between dhabiha and halal. However, in my understanding of the Sharia and understanding of the world to that point was, wait, Zabih and halal are the same thing. And then I realized, and I was exposed to this whole difference of opinion. In the beginning, to be honest, I was like, what can you do? And to be fair, every time when we went to restaurants as well, we would search for the Zabiha places. So if you went to a restaurant, and this is some parts of Chicago, and you said the food was halal, right? They said the food was halal. It could be the case by halal, they mean they got it from an Asda or a Christian supplier. That's why you have to inquire. You have to have a second level of inquiry saying, is it Zabiha? This is not the case in the UK, but in America, especially where there's not less Muslims, but Muslims are more spread out, and there's a spectrum of different types of Muslims who have moved to the West. This thing is rampant. And I think as well, it's the availability of food. When I went to America, I remember, when I went to the supermarket, in Jannah, there's hadith about Jannah and description of
But
paradise.
Imad, we've got
There's
like 10
colors.
seconds left. We've got about 10 seconds
I'll
left, man.
finish on this. Is really funny. There's colors which you haven't even seen before, right? So when I went to the supermarket, there's flavors of drink which I haven't even ever seen this color before. This flavor of Fanta, there's so many different kind of flavors and this sort of thing. Okay, so the summary of this whole point is respecting difference of opinion when it comes to food as well, and halal and haram can actually change when it comes to food depending on what part of the world you are. Crocodile kebab. I don't know if you guys had crocodile kebab.
Okay, inshallah.
Maliki
Jazakallah
fiqh
khair,
crocodile
Imad. That's
kebab,
very good,
guys.
man. We'll see everyone next week. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.